Hello, all, and welcome to the Fantasy and Sci-Fi Fanatics podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Coolbaugh. Today, I have me a very special guest, DM Rook. DM, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me on here. Happy to be here. Happy to be speaking to people. I always like hearing myself talk, so this is a great experience for me.
Ironically, I do this podcast, but I do not like to hear myself talk. So I had a student a while back that listens, and they're like, "Oh, did you go back?" And it takes me a long time. I do this for notes, right? So I'll go and I'll write notes and stuff, and I'll go in and I'll actually like go into the transcript and I'll actually go and take those notes off of like something you guys say or something. But
Mhm.
or I'll like skip over my voice because I can't stand it. Maybe it's like teaching or something. So yeah, he was asking me something. I was like, no, I can't. I like can't stand the sound of my own voice. So I get those like actors that, like don't go and watch their own movies. I'm like,
Mhm.
I kind of can understand that. But yeah, he was like, that's really weird, Mr. Kubal, because you're a podcast host and a teacher. So maybe that's why I hear my own voice too often. But I totally get that. Well, I'm glad to have you on today and we could talk. I need some more people within your genre and subgenres, I should say, on here. So I was trying to intermix. So glad to, hear from you. Had someone else drop. I was like, oh, it's like a perfect, like you guys are almost like nearly identical. So it was like
Mhm.
a really, really nice just switch. Makes it just so much easier for me. So I really appreciate you coming on and filling that gap for me. But we'll start with that first question. What has your writing journey been like up until this point?
Um, I want to say that it's been done in like phases or bursts.
Mhm.
As in like I get something inspires me to start writing, and I'll write 20K words, and then um I go on and maybe it like slows down and I get like 500 there, 400 there, um every other day or whatever. And then um I have really bad ADHD, so if I start doing something else and it's something that like interests me, then I completely forget about like my writing. And I drop my writing to uh for a little bit to pursue something else. But I always come back to writing, and um, it's definitely one of those things that uh, is positively reinforced just by people reading or listening to it, and getting their feedback or hearing how much they like it. It's something that is positively reinforced in a way of like it's not like my other interests where I was super into mead making for like 3 months,
Okay.
and then I made mead once, and it tasted horrible, never made it again. It's one of those things that like keeps me coming back to it every time. So I'm not like the best writer around. I'm not the most diligent writer around, but I somehow always manage to come back and write.
I feel that. I've been so busy lately. I'm like, we'll get home and I'm like, oh, I have this stuff to do. So that's like this season. I'm like trying to get done because I just like I've had so many things stretch and like
Hmm.
this huge project for my students at school. I've had to like have kids come back. Like we're not even in school.
Yeah.
But it's like a vital project that we're doing for our community colleges like daycare. And they have like a deadline date now, like July 29th. So we had this huge issue with like sizing of shelf and stuff that had to get rearranged. So I had to, like we're like having to redo this whole design thing. And my wife, she's like, she's like, I think you just need to like get a few things done because she's like every project you've done has been like has gotten like we were doing these benches for my college too, and we had to like wait because I have like
Yeah.
a vinyl cutter where like I need new blades and stuff, and I couldn't order them because of the due date and stuff. So she's like, I think you just need to like get a few things done. She's like, you're in this like limbo with so much.
Yeah.
She's like, I think it's hard for you to focus. I'm like, yeah, totally. So I get that. It's like I keep going once I'm like kind of like done with certain things, and
Yeah.
mentally I can always come back to it. So I totally get that. I think
Mm.
that's the fun thing about writing in particular, is that you can just come back. Like you don't have to write every day. I physically can't, to
Yeah.
be honest. Like I used to, but now I got a little guy, he's 2.5, and between him and I got like 3 jobs with
Yeah.
education. So it's just like some days it's just like I'm just exhausted. And I'm actually gonna do a video about this tonight, just being like it's okay,
Yeah.
as long as I'm having fun and getting some stuff out there, I think that's totally fine. So I think
Yeah.
whatever works for you, right? Like
Yeah. No, I always say that like I love storytelling. I hate writing.
it's a good one. Yeah, that's so true.
Like I love like theory crafting and like making these worlds, making this universe, and picturing these scenes that I plotted out in my head. But when it comes to like putting it down, putting words to paper, and it's like, okay, I have this idea for a great scene. It's just 80,000 words down the line, and somehow we're gonna get there. That's where the hard part comes in for me.
Yeah,
So
it's totally true. Yep.
yeah, so I love storytelling and I love world building, hate writing.
It's like that. Like I have like a few things I've been wanting to do lately, and I'm like, oh, I'll just go and do this. And I'm like, but it's like I like know now, right? Like my process, I know I'm not just gonna go and write it well the first time. Like I know it's gonna take me 3 or 4 times. So like I'm like that's where I'm like kind of getting stuck because usually I just write. Like if I'm stuck on this, I'll just go and write this. I usually have 3 projects, which my friend suggests. I have like my main project. I got my secondary one. So if I'm having trouble on my main one, I can actually just go over my secondary one or vice versa. So at least I'm like moving forward. They have a third thing that's just for fun. But lately I'm just like, oh, it's gonna take me so long to get to the point where it's like fun for certain things,
Hmm.
or like readable. I think that's what's been stopping me lately. So I gotta just like kind of get out of my own way. But yeah, it's interesting to. I always talk to people on here. It's always interesting to find your process, right? And like what works and doesn't work. And I think at times too, I just was talking to a couple authors, who are way down the road as veterans and traditionally published and indie published. And it's so interesting which I think they make a good point though, like we're people, we change, right? So your taste as a writer or reader change over time too. And I think that, some things that work for you now might not work for you later, depending on what's going on with your life or, your experience level or the story even, right? So
Yeah.
I think it's always good to, find what works and what doesn't work and try something new, right? As my friend always says. But speaking of writing though, what genres do you currently write in and why?
Yeah, so obviously Hounds of Orion, which is my breakout book, is a sci-fi mecha space odyssey type deal. I'm currently working on book 2 of that. Um And on top of that, I'm also writing another story right now called Rift Breaker,
Cool.
and it is a system post-apocalypse urban fantasy type thing. Um, and then I'm working on another piece with a buddy of mine who's another author. And this one is more like high fantasy um isekai type bit where um this guy from Pittsburgh gets transported to another world and things happen. um so kind of just all over the place.
Okay.
I With Rift Breaker, um I I wasn't tricked into writing it. It was more of like the my publisher, who's a good friend of mine. He uh right now, I get like system apocalypses and lit RPG and isekai, like they're very hot right now in terms of
Mhm.
like the indie publishing space. um because it's just, they're light novels, they're anime without, or manga without pictures, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and so, but like they're very hot right now, but especially because like when you put them on like Royal Road tends to have like a by and large a younger audience. And uh he was like, I think you should write something more meta. I think with your writing style and with everything else, like, you know, you you should definitely give it a shot. And I said, I don't wanna. And he said, stop being a baby. And I said, fine. and so I started with Riftbreaker, and I come to find out like I actually like writing it, um, and like making the system and everything, and how it's working out. Um, so yeah, I'm kind of like warming up to the more popular mainstream indie genres a little bit more.
I think it's good that to point out, right? Like sometimes, like I've had some people on here, and I had somebody who was like, "Oh, I'm like this is like my season one." I'm trying to remember who it was, but they were. I remember specifically, they're like, I want to do horror. I wanted to write horror. They're like, but they're like I was just writing basically like dark fantasy. So finally, one of their more veteran friends was like, "Why don't you just write dark fantasy?" Like, and so he's like, "No, I got to be a horror writer. I was going to be a horror author. Like I love Stephen King, and I
Yeah,
blah 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 blah." And like, but finally, like he got out of his own way and listened to his friend, and he wrote awesome dark fantasy. And people seem to really enjoy them. So I always find that very interesting for myself too. I'm like, yeah, I love urban fantasy. I got some urban fantasy stuff coming out.
yeah.
I don't think I'm as good at it. That's why it's taking me longer than like just like straight fantasy or any of the subgenres. Sci-fi is definitely one that I really enjoy, but it's hard for me to write. So I'm kind of I don't know. Same thing. I don't want to like kind of put myself into a box. I know some people are like I want to stick to this one thing, but I'm like, well, what if you're sticking to that one thing? But I've talked to a lot of people where they're like, yeah, I did pretty well here, but then I started to do this
Yeah.
or this subgenre. So for me, I'm kind of want to do a little bit, of threads for here and there, and then maybe see if there's a different subgenre that, fits my voice tone or writing style or something like that better. So I think that's smart that you're listening to people and trying some new things. So I think that's good advice.
I'm really kind of like stuck in where I want to put myself, because I I'm blessed with the vision that I know what I can do well and what I don't do very well.
Yeah.
Like I I would hesitate to say I do very, very realistic dialogue, and I write realistic characters. Um and I think that I do fight scenes very well. Um but those two things, like in context, they're very like nebulous in a way of like it's hard to really pin down just what genre that those two things
Sure,
would
yeah.
work amazingly in, right? Because
Yeah.
you can have amazing dialogue in every genre. You can other than like um like maybe like a mystery novel or anything else like that, like you can have fight scenes in any genre or anything like that. So it's really hard to kind of like pin down just where my niche is. And so, I've kind of like taken on the idea of like, let's just throw things at a wall until we see what sticks.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, again, I think it's smart though, rather than I know some people like just met a guy, he's like, yeah, I'm like 5 books into this dark fantasy series, and I'm like, you wrote 5 books? He's like, yeah, wrote 5 books. I got him edited everything. I'm like, that just to me, like that just sounds like a lot of work, like before publishing. Like it's great to right to have a plan and things, but I'm just like, man, like that's a lot of work. Like what if it's not working? And obviously you could edit and do whatever, but
Yeah.
I know to me it's just too many eggs in one basket sort of thing. I don't know, like I got a lot of like I could probably make anything I have at this point into a trilogy. Or and then I got like ideas for after that. So you could do a subset trilogy after that or something like that. But I don't know. To me, it's kind of interesting to see what people's, and again, each to their own. So maybe it's just me, but yeah, me, I'm like, I want to put a wire over here and connect it over here. And then, and I have some things where it's like, they have like I like the World of Warhammer and Warhammer 40K. So I got some fantasy stuff that I could easily turn into 3,000 years later, like Brandon
Yep.
Sanderson in the same world and make it sci-fi, with some magic or something like, but I don't know. Yeah, it's always interesting, I think, to see what people's plans are and things like that. But for myself, I agree with you. I like to throw things, here, there, and kind of see what sticks. I don't know. To me, being on here, it just seems to be a better strategy, I
Yeah.
guess, is what I'm seeing. So for me, I'm like, I don't want to waste time. So, I don't know. I like to go off of, what I've seen for people mostly on here and I'm almost 200 episodes in, and to me, it seems like what you just said makes more sense. But again, each to their own. So for me, maybe it just makes more sense to me. But yeah, that's definitely the route I'm going. So I feel you there.
Yeah, no, the people that I'm most jealous of is like Nancy Drew. Um,
Okay.
or any like people that like write those, like mystery novels where it's the same like detective for
Yeah,
like 50 plus novels. Like, because at that point, like you've like established a brand, and like
yeah,
you're just building on the brand, but like how do you keeping these like same things and like the same context and everything like that. So I'm definitely jealous of people who can write the same in the same universe for so long.
yeah.
But yeah, no, like I'm right there with you. Like we're gonna dip our toes in a little bit of everything and see what pops.
Yeah, it's like Dresden Files, right? Like I think it's so interesting. Like once you get to book, like really, I think once you get to book, I just got no one was like book 8, and there's like a question that Harry asks at the end, and like it's wild, right? That just like, and then you start to think, right? But like Jim slowly starts to change what the whole world's about and what the last like 8 books you read were about, with like one question, with one introspective question that Harry asks himself, and it's kind of wild. And then he goes with it from there, and I don't know, it slowly changes this urban fantasy world almost into like a high fantasy, and it's wild, right? But it's like to me, like I'm analyzing that, I'm like, I think it made sense, right? Because for him, he's still in the urban fantasy world for his readers, his characters, but he's able to then introduce things. He clearly wanted to go in a slightly different direction than he had set up, but it was I've never seen somebody go that deep into a series and then do such a good job of like changing the direction where it made like total sense. And it really came from like one small scene from like book 8, I think it was, or book 9. So it's kind of wild. And now I'm like really into it. I'm like more into it now than I was. I'm like, oh, this is getting really, really good. And yeah, I don't know. I think, it is nice for those people. Like, yeah, I can't imagine being like the Hardy Boys and writing like 50 of them, right?
Oh yeah, no, definitely.
It's
Like
just
I couldn't
wild.
do it. Yeah.
Or like the Boxcar Children, like where you have like 25 or something like that. I know they're small and stuff, but I think actually writing smaller ones is actually harder. But yeah, I used to read those all the time. The Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys. I was like really into both of those for a really long time. But
Yeah, no,
which is
same.
wild. Like I love mysteries, but I don't like writing them. Like I'm not good at it. So
I think writing mysteries is you have to be smarter than like
yeah.
the average bear.
Yeah.
Like you can't make a mystery like if you make a mystery where people that like can like figure it out by like chapter 5,
Exactly.
you
Yep.
still need to write out the mystery in a way of like the people who have already figured it out feel smart for figuring it
Yeah,
out.
yeah, yeah.
And like that, it's almost like literary math.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah. No,
Like
it totally
that's how I view it, and I hate math, so I don't think I could ever write a mystery novel.
is. That's fair. I always want to like do elements of it though. Like I have like a idea for like a fire mage or like elementalist who's like, but it'd be like fantasy version of like CSI, or like whatever, Chicago Fire or something like that. But like, I don't know. It's like it always sticks in my mind. But I'm like really have to study these other elements because I haven't read them in so long. I've been so addicted to like fantasy, sci-fi, and maybe some of these other things like the Reacher novels by Lee Childs and things like that. But yeah, I'm like, I'm always wanting to add these other elements in and into a fantasy and sci-fi because I've seen people do them and they've been so much fun. But for
Fantasy
me, it's more,
CSI would pop off, dude.
I know,
Like I'm
right?
telling you. Like you need like a fancy equivalent of like Horatio Kane that has like the
Right?
sunglasses and
Yep.
like
Yep.
yeah, no, like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that
Like an
that would
adult
go
version of my friend, he goes, it'd be like, or like an adult version of like Artemis Fowl. I was like, yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, no, that'd be
Yeah,
dope.
yeah, it'd be really interesting. Well, speaking of books, though, what is your book, Hounds of Orion, about, and how did you come up with this idea? I love the title, by the way.
Oh, thank you. So I'll answer the second question first because the
No problem.
first one is a little bit long-winded. I came up with the idea um during one of my ADHD stimming things where I was deep into Gundam at the time,
Oh, nice.
and I was watching like a bunch of Gundam series. I was making the models and like freehanding like their design and like making like custom stuff and everything else, right? Um, when I don't know. Have you ever seen Mobile Fighter G Gundam?
Yeah, like probably I want to say it was a while ago now.
Okay, so
Now that I'm a dad, it's like time has no meaning. But
okay,
I have, but it's like a long time ago.
right. So like for those that are listening or watching my non-camera screen, um most Gundam shows are very serious and very um they're space operas, right?
Yeah.
Uh Mobile Fighter G Gundam is the wackiest, like most bombastic, ridiculous like thing. It's like Gundam was like made by like Americans. That's all you can
It's
explain it. So
very
like
true.
all the countries no longer live on Earth. They all have these like colonies, and every 4 years, to see which colony is in charge of the others, they send all these Gundam fighters to Earth to just break things and figure out who's the strongest. And they don't pilot them in the initial sense of like where you have like a cockpit in the seat. They have this system where uh like they put like essentially UFC fighters in like skin tight latex suits that mimic their movements, and then they throw hands for a 30-minute episode. So that was my first foray into Gundam as a whole. I remember watching it as a kid, and I watched it again as an adult. And that was the type of Gundams that like I remember and that I feel close with. And uh so I was like, I really want to write a mecha thing, but I can't really do it this stupid. And I was reading Warhammer 40K at the time, which they're one of the new books, Assassinorum, I think is what's called. Um, excuse me. And they had the Imperial Knights there, and they were talking about like very grim, dark things. People screaming, lots of pain, like death, suffering, all that good stuff. Um, and so I just kind of like combined them together, and I was like, okay, well, let's write out this story about what it would look like. And so the story itself, it is set um in the year 2848, where humanity has left Earth and they have colonized um the entire Milky Way galaxy. And in doing so and stretching themselves so thin, they have inadvertently created two factions that control the galaxy. The first one, of course, is EarthGov, and they control the largest space. They have representatives that they installed onto these planets that are acting like noble families. And when they were going to colonize the last bit, they turned to corporations and they essentially said, hey, we have all these prisoners here. You can use them to colonize this part of space and make it your own with um, zero like labor laws or unions or anything like that, right? um, Space Delaware. And and so they in this way of doing this, there was some like rebellions and things that have like kind of like gone on. And so now those prisoners, or actually their ancestors of prisoners, have formed what's called free space. And it is a space that's still run by corporations, but just in a different way. And in order for these warfare things to happen and fights to be conducted, they use what are called arms units, or armored robotic mechanized skeletons. And they are piloted in kind of a similar way to the Mobile Fighter G Gundam, just a lot more pain, where each pilot has these uplink threads, which are, if you take like a screw hole that has like threads inside the catch on to the screw. Um, they have those 3 on each arm, 3 on each leg, 3 on the back of their spine, and then they have a neural uplink port at the base of their brainstem. And so what happens is they enter the mech from the back, and they are screwed inside of their mech. And so it creates a 1-to-1 movement to operator ratio. And then there's other things like there's Fizzolite, which is just these rods of hardened light that function as like proxies, where if the pilot's holding it in his hand, it simulates what the mech is holding, which is a giant mace or things like that. And you have, your standard EarthGov armies or your nobility armies, but where the focus is that we're going to is in free space. It is a mercenary run society. So you have galactic arms companies, or GACs, that do business with other types of corporations, and they take on contracts, whether that be in free space or in EarthGov territory. And we see, at least in the main story of Hounds of Orion, where our main character is he grew up as a noble in the system of EarthGov, and then through some shenanigans ends up becoming a mercenary in free space. So we see both worlds that it takes place in this setting.
It's cool.
Yeah.
Well, since you started to mention already, this is where I was talking to Casey. I was like, yeah, I have this like mech marine thing I really want to do. And yeah, like I actually wrote like a bunch of book 1 before my son was born. I had like 14 days and I busted out like I think 48 to 50,000 words. It's
Yeah.
total crap, but the idea is there, right? And
Yeah.
it was fun. But I always love talking to people about my next question. So what type of technology did you incorporate into your war machines, as you call them? Awesome name, by the way.
Yeah. So so for like the arms units, I went to like a more like soft sci-fi route, because I think that there's only so big that you can make laser go boom before it just gets like ridiculous. So I made the units, they're 10 meters tall. Each of them wield like a melee weapon, or like a melee outfit, and they're all styled from like ancient Earth warriors. So
That's cool.
You would have like a crusader who has a giant tower shield and a mace. The main character, he pilots it's what's called a headsman, which is just a giant executioner sword that is so heavy it has to be piloted in the way of, like, if you make a downswing, you then have to adjust your body to follow with the trajectory of the downswing in order to keep up your momentum. You have things like the gunslinger, the Apache, the Ronin, things like that. And where we kind of get into like the progression sci-fi aspect of it, to kind of give a nod back to what Royal Road likes, and they like to see numbers go up.
Yeah.
Is we've instituted a ranking system of pilots, and the thought behind it is, if you have enough money, you can buy a top of the line mech, you can outfit it with whatever you want, but you don't know how to pilot it. So now you are a detriment to, not only yourself and your team, but worst of all, the company's image, and they don't want that. And so they've held them back based on rank. So you have alpha, beta, gamma, sigma, and omega. And they kind of like just grow up exponentially in terms of what upgrades you can add. And I think that in book 1, they talk about a situation where they see 2 omega mechs fight, but they don't actually see them fight. They just see them disappear, followed by a series of very loud sonic booms for about 30 seconds until one of them is like clump of melted slag on the ground.
That's cool.
And how I've always described it is that like alpha class, you're piloting a mech that's going 150 miles an hour. At omega, you're not really going super fast. You are, but like it's more of like, let me rip a hole in reality right here and then jump across the other side.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
Uh, it's really cool. I just want to go back. I love how you like classified, like based off of like Earth Warriors for your mechs. That's just like such a cool idea. There was like there was a show like that in the 90s that was very like Gundam, but it was like a little different. I remember having like the action figures, and that's what they did. And I was like, oh, this is so cool. But it wasn't like massive mechs. It was like they were like almost like just a little bit over human size.
Yeah.
But yeah, they did. I loved it where they each had like a different weapon and stuff. Like historical like weapon that was just like
Yeah.
mechanized. Yeah, so it's like really super super cool.
I'm
Yeah,
I'm
go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, I was just saying like I've kind of like expanded on it as like I've gotten into like book two,
Oh, that's
um
cool.
in terms of um like once you reach like a certain rank, you get what's called like a combat protocol, which is almost like a signature attack, right? So which isn't really a spoiler. In book two, there's a part where there's a fight between the main character and his mech, and he's fighting he does not have one, but he's fighting somebody that does.
Mm.
And this his opponent's mech is a boxer, so it's essentially just like hand to hand combat. Um, and during the fight, the boxer activates its combat protocol, and like tendrils of black lightning form they're just like wires of black lightning that form like around his gauntlets, and it kind of gives him like tethers to where like he can yank the main character to him or vice versa, and just like close in and just start beating the hell out of him.
The scorpion, get over here. I
Yeah,
like it.
pretty much. Yeah. So things like that.
That's awesome. That's super cool. Well, I had to find it in my queue in Netflix 'cause it's been a while. But I'm curious because when you're mentioning these corporations, so they're like sponsoring different mechs then? Is that right?
There, yeah, kind of, sort of. How it works is, uh, the pilots themselves form their own GAC, their own Galactic Arms Company,
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
and then corporations will come to them and say, hey, we have an issue on this world, and then the GACs will then bid on this contract, and they'll go and they'll do it. And but the greater part of free space as a whole is ran by these GACs, simply because they're the people with the biggest sticks.
Right.
And so it's the biggest GACs that kind of have a say at the table, but every GAC can like vote or talk about things that would affect free space as a whole, versus EarthGov just has one centralized government.
That's cool. But it just reminds me of like the TV show Dark Matter. I felt like that one they did like with their robot, and they did such a good job of like going into space, and instead of it being countries, being corporations, and then the corporations had all the like they really had all the power. And like I always recommend it to people in terms of world building for sci-fi in particular, because it's like I've rarely seen people do such a good job, with how they've, really gone off something we know, like corporations, but then, really, I mean, it totally makes sense with how they did it with like that, the corporations would have, like you said, like have a bigger stick. So that's what it kind of reminded me of that. And I love that in terms of how they did that on the show, on the Sci-Fi Channel in terms of their world building. It was made some of the coolest, like storylines and stuff like that, and it really made you think in terms of themes
Mm-hmm.
and different questions, particularly within a sci-fi like universe. So that's really neat. But I, I just feel like in terms of world building, like what did you? I guess I got to know. Like I got to know, like what did you focus on first, and then like kind of where did you go from there? Like what was your process like for the world building for this book?
So my main focus was, of course, on the mechs. Especially in like a mecha novel, I want to make sure that they were the focal point. So it was all right. how are these things piloted? What do they look like? How do they operate? What are we going to call them? And then focus on that, and then from there kind of branched out. So
Gotcha.
I branched out from the concept of mecha into the greater world, air quotes, the galaxy as a whole, um, and thought about, like, like the distinction between different things, and the different factions, and how they work, down to the people, and how they think about things, and how they kind of act. Like, there's no good guy in these books. They're all just kind of like opportunists. Like Cameron, who's the name of like our main character, yeah, he does good things, but he does good things more often than not. He's still a mercenary at the end of the day. Like, he's still getting paid to put people in the ground. And you know, no one, but that's just how people view it. It's not a matter of like our way of thinking here, where like this is wrong or this whatever. It's like, this is a paycheck, and if I'm not going to do it, someone else is.
Mhm.
There's a part later on in the series where you have a married couple that works for two rival GACs, and they find each other on the battlefield, and it's very much like, okay, I won't target your group, you don't target mine, and I'll meet you back home for dinner. um
Awkward dinner, right?
eh, well, it's pretty much like they know that they're strong enough to survive, so it's pretty much like a matter of like, hey, this is just the way things are. um and they kind of like not only accepted that, but evolved their thinking around that.
Oh. Now I'm kind of curious, in terms of so in terms of like themes, like what were some of like the themes that you were trying to go with, in terms of the world building? Were you trying to go for that the future is more, post-apocalyptic, dystopian, like that kind of thing in terms of sci-fi? Or, I don't know, I'm kind of curious that, yeah, like what were your themes that you were kind of focusing on in terms of your world building?
I'm being completely honest here. I have no idea what my themes are until someone tells me what they are.
Oh, that's fair. Yeah, yeah.
I wanted to, my whole process was like, I want to write a universe and what would justify a bunch of people getting inside mechs and
It
beating
makes
the
total
hell out of
sense.
each
Yeah,
other. Yeah.
yeah,
And how do I justify that? And
yeah, yeah.
then now, people are like, oh, I love these themes of
You're like, I did that the whole
dystopian.
time.
Yeah, like,
I planned
you
it.
know, find it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If that's what you think, you know what? That's what the theme is. Yeah,
You're like,
exactly.
I'm a genius.
Exactly.
But I think that makes sense though, is like I'm just curious because but I mean it's awesome though, but I do think you make a good point though, which I love the honesty because there's so many people I have on here where they're like, yeah, I didn't know what my themes were until I had already some people are like, until I wrote the trilogy, and
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, but I think that's totally fine, right? Like again, it's we all come from a different background of where we start for world building, I think starting with the mechs, the technology, things like that, and then going from there, right? Like and then from there being like, okay, what type of society do I need, right? That makes this possible.
Yeah.
Like good or bad, right? Like what happened to allow,
Yeah.
things to get to this point where this is how people have to solve their differences or, whatever, or bringing in the corporations, their interests and stuff and their greed or whatever. So I think that makes total sense. But yeah, but I think it's so cool too, how like you can everybody can go, about starting things differently, but then still get to similar themes or, just some really, really interesting stories and characters, and making them fun. So I think it's just good to point out, right? Like, I think it's always funny, right? Is when I was here, I was really excited because I was going to take an online writing course, and then And it sounded cool, right? I was like, sci-fi and
Mm,
fantasy offered online this summer, and it was
mm-hmm,
like $600. And I was like, oh, that sounds really cool. And it was through like
mm-hmm.
a pretty prominent university. And what did they say? Like, I mean, it was like
Yeah,
so typical, like structure and stuff. And like, whatever, the cat was in there. And like, I'm just like, I'm not gonna take that now because there was things that were so atypical. And I'm like, you can only do so much of that, right? Like for
yeah,
me, I'm like, I feel like I would get more out of it just writing and then talking to somebody like you and be like, hey, like writing more of my mech stuff and be like, hey, what do you think? And getting
yeah,
feedback from you. And, so, but it's interesting still, I think, to see like, sometimes structure, I think, or, saying, okay, I'm going to do these themes because I know people that are like, I'm going to do this theme. And then when they start to write, right, the characters change and
mm-hmm,
things change. And then all of a sudden the theme changes. So,
yeah.
I mean, some people like to go with that first and then go from there. Some people like to just write and come with them later. And some people just like to have fun and don't care. So I think, again, whatever works for you. So I think that makes total sense.
I think it's very important for writers as a whole to be honest
Hmm.
about what their process is.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
Yep.
I think that, you know, I like you said, there's a lot of writers that come on, it's like I didn't know what my themes were. And I feel like at the end of the day, as a writer, it's important to just focus on the biggest thing, which is telling a good story.
Yeah,
if
yeah,
if you tell a good story, you'll find your themes in there. Or maybe you don't even care about your themes, but you care about what how the plot goes and you want to see this go. Like,
yep,
not everything that has ever been written, or not every popular thing that's ever been written, will have the same gravitas and the same lasting impression as Shakespeare, right?
yeah,
But I'm not gonna read Shakespeare every day of my life. Sometimes I want to read People magazine,
yep,
or things that are just silly and dumb for the sake of being silly and dumb,
yeah, yeah,
or
no, yeah.
things like that.
Well, there's like, I mean, there's so many books I've read. Forgotten Realms, I just wanted to, or Dragonlance or something, like I just wanted to go along with some cool characters, see some magic, see some fighting, and you know, see some cool world building and have a good adventure, and I think that the theme was the adventure, but that's like, I had friends ask me like, well, what do you write in terms of fantasy? I'm like, well, I'm like, I love thieves and stuff and rogues, and really like that, like redemption, I think is what you could call it, like where somebody's using their skills and gets plopped into a situation and maybe tries to do some good. I was like, I guess you could say that's redemption.
Hmm.
But other than that, I'm like, I don't know, like I got these guys running around with some things. I almost gave it away, my friend. I almost said something I shouldn't have said.
With some
Uh,
stuff and some things, and they're
yeah, yeah,
doing.
yeah. Yeah, I almost gave away a really big thing there for one of my dark fantasies. But yeah, it's like I never really think about it until people have asked me recently, and until I'm done writing the book, I'm like, at least somewhat, or into certain drafts, I'm like, oh yeah, I guess this is the theme. But
Yeah,
I always find it funny when people they're like, what is your theme? I'm like, I don't know if I have one. So I'm glad
I
that
can
I'm
tell you
giving
the
it one.
plot.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
You can figure
yeah.
that out for yourself.
Yeah, it's like yeah, you like flip it, right? Like why don't you tell me, you read the book, buy the book, read the book, review the book, and then tell me two themes and what you like. See, I think
Exactly. I already did my work over here.
yeah,
Now it's your turn.
yeah, yeah. I always say that to my students to like say something. I'm like, no, I already passed all my tests. I'm like, I don't need to do your work too. So I think that makes total sense. All right, so which character was the hardest for you to write and why?
I think um any female character is hard for me to write.
Oh, I think that makes
And
total sense.
and it's hard for me to write because I'm not a woman, so I don't share in the headspace I don't have the headspace of a woman. I have the headspace of a man. And like I said, I know I do dialogue very well, and I do characters very well, and because of that, there is a self-imposed pressure of making characters that are not just one bit, or are not just very simple and everything else. So I didn't want to make, oh, here's a token woman character. I wanted them to have their own agency in how they do things. And we go along with that of like, you know we all know, we've all known that dude in high school who's or college or whoever, whose whole process in life of he's just like, I just want to get a date, or I just want to get late or whatever, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, and I never thought I didn't think it would be outside the possibility to, write a woman whose thought process is kind of like that same way, right? Um, where it is, writing someone who thinks that way, but are just a different gender. I've known people who are high stressed and angry, um, and just kind of figured out, okay, well, who would make sense for this scenario? Um, and then I've taken into account, well, as a former Marine who's been in a male dominated profession, but has also worked with women who were in that profession. What were they like? And
Hmm.
then I said, okay, well, let me translate that into this book. And so we have characters like we have uh Aurora Laurentis, I think I said her last name was. And she is like the main mechanic for the crew. She's fairly young. She's a young woman, fairly brilliant in what she does. And that's kind of where I drew inspiration for creating her from. Was what is it like to be a woman, especially a young woman in a male dominated field, and how you need to act. And luckily, I was helped out by something one of my former superiors had said, because she was a um, one of our gunnery sergeants, and she was always very she was much more strict on the female Marines than she were the male Marines, where um, she had always said that if you want to earn their respect, you can't just exceed by the standards they've set out for you. You need to exceed by their standards as well. Um, and so that's kind of how I wrote her. But yeah, as a whole, I think women are very hard for me to write, but only because I want to write them as close to realistic as possible.
Yeah, yeah. I think it makes total sense. Ironically, for me, it's my Marine. Because I mean, I'm not an expert in, I would say I'm not an expert in, bladed weapons or anything like that. But in terms of martial weapons and like archery, like I'm pretty up there. But in terms of like, I've never been much into guns and stuff. My dad's a big hunter and stuff, and I've gone hunting with him and things, and know how to use them and stuff. But when I try to write, I have a veteran Marine who turns monster hunter, based off of some experiences he has actually while on tour and on duty. So I've like talked to J.R. Wise, who's a veteran, and he's gonna help me out a bit. So if you ever want to read anything, I'll send you free books there, my friend.
Oh yeah,
'Cause
no, great.
I want to make sure I'm getting it right. But I have a female. I was gonna have her be a Marine, but she told me recently she was like, "No, I'm actually like Army veteran," and she has a very similar experience. And she was like, "Oh yeah, I'm like this. I'm like a lead character. I'm a co-lead, not like a secondary character." I'm like, okay, and so yeah, so I'm always trying to get I totally get it. Like they're really hard for me because I haven't been in those scenarios and things, but I definitely want to make sure that they are done really well, and they're telling me like this is who I am. So for me it wasn't necessarily that I picked. It was just like one day, I don't even remember, like my male lead, he was like, "Yep, this happened to me and this is who I am," and stuff. And it was really interesting. So yeah, I totally get it though. And then now I have like a female like Army veteran. I'm like, I definitely don't know how to write her. So that's like twice as hard. So
If you can string together an entire sentence using nothing but like the F-bomb, you're in a great place. That's how you write Marine dialogue.
yeah, yeah. My friend, he's not a Marine, but he had worked with a lot of them, let's say, with his field.
Uh,
And I know that he, has certain things so I can't say his name and stuff. But yeah, so he was helping me out, and he was like, yeah, he's like, you have got, instead of clean up the dialogue, he's like, you have to dirty up this dialogue a
yeah, yeah,
lot.
you do. You
I'm
really
like,
do.
and I didn't think about it. I was like, you're totally right. Like, and he goes, yeah, you have Marine friends, right? I was like, I have friends from every walk of life in the military. And he goes, yeah, just imagine hanging out with them. And I started thinking about, I was like, shoot, I was like, I had to change a lot of stuff, and I still am. But it was really funny. But yeah, it's there's a lot more swearing.
Oh yeah.
Let's just say that much. And a lot more your mom jokes and things like that.
Hmm.
Based off of some of my conversations I've had with some of my friends at some late nights and things.
Hmm.
But yeah, I totally get it. It's hard, right? Because you really want to make your characters, right? Like,
Hmm.
you want to make them real, and you want people to connect with them, and you don't want to, be short-sighted in anything. So I totally get that. Um, so if you could, I can't wait to hear what you have to say on this one. If you could have and use any piece of technology from sci-fi, what would it be and why?
So I don't want to disappoint you, but um my answer, any teleporter, because
Good one, though. That's a
that
good one.
that's a good one, because if I'm still me in my life,
Yep. Oh, I could use
I
that.
yeah, I can get to work like without having to fight traffic. I can go
Yep.
wherever I need to
So
go
much
without
writing coming back.
paying.
Yep.
Yeah, without having, or like just travel
Yep.
without having to pay like airport or like airplane fee, anything like
Yeah, yeah.
that. Just a teleporter would be amazing.
I think I've been thinking about this a lot, actually, because my friend asked me. He told me my answer. He was like, I don't think that's what I would say. I go, well, that's what I would say. I totally agree with you, because I have my nieces and nephews are three of them are in Michigan, so we live in central New York. I have friends. My best friend lives in Michigan. I have friends that live all over the world. So I would
Mhm.
love to. I have friends in like South Korea. It's like I can't ever talk to them because it's like when they're awake, like I'm asleep.
Yeah,
So I would
yeah,
love just to hop over. Have some kimchi or something with them, or and bulgogi or something, and
yeah.
hang out and be back before the sun comes up. So I totally get that. I think that's a really good one. Yeah, no, most people
Appreciate
haven't
that.
said that, so I think that's a good one. But I totally
Appreciate
feel
that.
you there. I know we're wrapping up on time. I want to make sure we have enough time to talk about that last question. So, do you have any news, updates, current projects, anything like that that you can share with us?
Yeah, so Hounds of Orion is out now on both Amazon and Audible. We actually dropped the audiobook
Oh,
Thursday or Wednesday
oh,
last week.
cool. Oh, that's awesome. That
So
helps me out. I do both. I do Kindle and Audible, just
yeah, yeah.
with dad
So
life, so that's awesome. It's so funny that like I had somebody who came on recently. They said what you just said, and then like maybe like two more short stories or something. They're like, yeah, I don't have that much. I was like, that is so much. Like even an audiobook, you know what I mean? I'm like, that's a whole nother product,
yeah,
and they have to pedal and everything. And I'm like, it's wild to me. Like it's so funny, like because one of our traditionally published friends had watched that interview where our indie friend had said that, and they're just like, oh my God, they're like, I'm so jealous of like having more products at this point out in the same year, let alone, like an audiobook and stuff like that. So I always find it funny when people are like, yeah, like I don't have that much. I'm like, that's a ton of stuff. Like you should be really proud. So I think that's really awesome. But I'm really excited about the audiobook. That just helps me out because if anybody has one, I know it's hard because I'm looking into doing like a Kickstarter next year after my prequel novella trilogy's out. And I'm actually just going to do it as like a set on Kickstarter, and then I'm hoping to do like a rewards for like the audiobook and stuff. I've already talked to a couple of narrators, but yeah, it always helps me out with the
yeah.
dad life and work, and because I'll listen to it on the way to school, and then on the way home, and then I'll like be really into it. Then I'll just get on Kindle and just fly through. So that's really awesome. Well, I really appreciate you coming on today. I want to remind our audience, if this is like the first time you've been here, you can find DM Rook's book and social links in the description below, anywhere where you're watching or listening to this podcast. We want to remind everybody that when you are, if you are doing a Kindle, copy, paperback from Amazon or something like that, Barnes and Noble, or if you are listening on Audible, don't forget that Audible is separate from Amazon in terms of reviews. So they are different products, and so if you are like me and you're listening to DM's book, Hounds of Orion, and then you are also reading it, I always make sure I just copy and paste my review over to both. But again, those reviews are going to be the main thing that we're trying to help, not just authors and comic book artists, but everybody that's been on here this season. Reviews help everybody. DM mentioned, his audio narrator doing, the reviews help, those people as well. Same thing, we talked about the artists, editors, those kind of things. So you guys could just make sure as an audience that you're continuing to review your products. It really helps everybody out here. DM, thank you so much for coming on. This has been a blast. You got my brain to work in before my writing session later this evening, so I can't wait to get at some stuff and get some good things down. But thank you so much for letting me pick your brain today. I look forward to having you on in the future, with like book 2 or anything else you want to chat about. I always give veterans of the podcast first dibs on spots for the next season. So if you have any thing else coming up and you want to hop on, you just email me, and we'll set something up and we'll get you on as soon as we can. So I'm Yeah, not a problem. Well, I hope you have a great rest of the day, my friend, and I will talk to you soon. See you later.